I just want to say thank you to David, thank you to all the staff at DCPL, to Politics and Prose, to the foundation for making this night possible and all of the programming that they do to keep us united as a community, a literary community. So thank you all for everything you do, and thank you for showing up. This is an amazing crowd, and we're all here, and we're really excited to get to welcome Clevis Natera for her. For her second book. So I'm going to read her bio because you've done amazing things and they deserve to be recognized. So I'm going to read it. Clevis Natera is the author of Neruda on the Park, her first book, which is amazing. I'm also adding things. She was born in the Dominican Republic, migrated to the United States at 10 years old, and grew up in New York City. She holds a BA from Skidmore College and an MFA from New York University. Her writing has won awards and fellowships from the International Latino Book Awards, PEN America, the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, the Kenyon Reviews Writers Workshop, the Vermont Studio Center, the Hermitage Artist Retreat, Roland Writers Retreat, and the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts. She is currently, we're not done. She is currently a Fulbright specialist. She lives with her husband and her two beautiful children in Montclair, New Jersey. The Grand Paloma Resort is her second novel. Please, can we all give a great big round of applause for Clevis Natera? Let's see. All right, it should be on now. There you go.
This is life goals. You too will get to a point where someone else will turn your microphone on when you don't know how to turn it on. Thank you for being here with me, Lupita. I love you so much.
It's such an honor, and I love you.
Lupita has been like such a guiding light for me on social media. Which can be such a toxic place, but you know, there's still love that can be found out there, and you have just been such an advocate of literature, especially Latinx literature, and I'm so thankful for you. And I'm so thankful to David and to the foundation. It's my first time in this building. We just went upstairs to the roof, and I was like, it feels like fall. You know, I don't know what's going on, but I like it. I was in the Dominican Republic last week. It was 98 degrees there. So it's nice to be here and to feel the cool air and to see all your beautiful faces. So thank you for being here with us.
Yeah, and so we're gonna do a little bit of a reading, and then we're gonna have a chat, and then we'll turn to audience questions. So as we're talking about this book, and I know this is brand new. It's literally hot off the press. What, Tuesday? Last Tuesday? Yeah. So, I mean, it's brand new. So, but, you know, as you're thinking through what we're talking about, feel free to just save your questions and we'll get to them at the end. But for now, I would love for you to just tell us about this amazing, I have not told her how I feel about this book yet, so you all are going to get the raw reactions, this amazing, thrilling book. And then if you could read it for us a little bit, that would be great.
Yeah. I'm gonna read. Let me just say, first of all, that like this is such a beautiful cross-section. I had a corporate job for 20 years. I know it sounds crazy. I mean, I thought some of you might gasp, because how could it be 20 years? I look 20. Y'all are gonna have to do better as an audience, okay? I'm gonna be grading you. They might not get a Q&A if they don't step it up. I don't know what's going on right now. Anyway, I worked a corporate job for 20 years. That's better. And so it's, you know, it's wonderful to see some of my old colleagues. I'm a teacher now. I'm a college professor and graduate school professor, and I see some of my students. And so it's just really lovely. From college, I'm not even gonna say how long ago that was, but it's wonderful to see some of my college fellow alumni from Skidmore. Anyway, so for those of you who don't know anything about this book, I'm looking at the people on the side. I'm gonna try to recruit people from the sidelines. The Grand Paloma Resort is a book that takes place over the course of 1 week. And it's about two sisters, Elena and Laura, who are both employees at the resort. The book is really dealing with the sisters' desire to get off of the resort and have a completely different life away from service. And there's a series of escalating crises that make it unlikely that they might get off the resort. So, you know, I'm one of those people that I'd rather get to the chat, and I'm very eager to hear what Lupita thinks, because she's been totally mum. She's been mom is the word, hasn't told me anything about what she thinks about the book. So I'm just gonna read to you like a page and a half so you can get a sense of the book. So the first thing I want you to know is that the book opens with a letter from the resort to the guests. I'm not gonna read that, but the main thing that you'll know from reading that letter is that this is the safest hotel in the Dominican Republic, okay? No violence, no accident has ever happened here, ever. Except guess what's about to happen right now? You can tell I like writing this book, right? I'm so excited to share with you. Chapter 1. The tourist child's mud-streaked body had become heavy, and sweat made her slippery in Elena's arms. As she made her way out from the tropical forest behind the Gran Paloma Resort, Elena headed not in the direction of the manicured grounds, but into the water-starved, cracked dirt of the staff quarters. Looking down at the little girl's unconscious form, she whispered, "Please, please, please, don't die on me." She walked through row after row of beautiful casitas, alternating between vibrant turquoise and the brightest yellow, with a flash of hot pink every fourth or fifth little house, each decorated with flower beds full of birds of paradise and lilac hibiscus bushes. It was the kind of sight that would make a visitor sigh in delight, unless they happened to touch the plants and realize they were plastic. Nothing got water on this side of the resort. Once she was safely inside the casita she shared with her older sister, Laura, Elena took a breath and looked around, unsure whether to lay the child on her bed or her sister's. Relief washed over her. No one had seen her. It was as if the dusty ground of that forest had lifted and shrouded her. She was paralyzed momentarily by the weight of the child's body. What was she, 60 pounds, 200? Elena was dizzy from the humidity and the heat. She'd been hired to take care of the now injured and unconscious child, looking after the girl by day and sleeping in a tiny, cut-sized room in the back of the kitchen of the penthouse suite that the girl and her parents occupied. She hadn't been in the casita all week. Elena's side was as messy as she left it. Unmade beds, strewn clothes, shoes everywhere. It was shocking. Her sister always cleaned up after her. Elena laid the kid on Laura's neatly made bed. She called the girl's name and shook her gently. No response. The blonde, bouncy curls that had swayed when they tried the latest viral TikTok dance that morning before their outing into the forest were matted with mud and blood. The kid's flat chest seemed too still. Had it been a mistake moving the child? I'll stop there. Okay, you're all warmed up. I like this. Much better, much better.
So that opening is not the worst thing that happens in the book, which I feel like there's so many beautiful themes and like plot points that we get to follow with these characters, Laura and Elena, who are the two sisters on this resort. And I think my biggest question that I was telling my wife while I was reading this, I was like, what was Clavis thinking? Like, oh my God, I was like, the entire time I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is so thrilling. So I'm just curious about the inspiration. And I think about how, you know, I don't know if this was, I've noticed that you have been posting a lot about the clips of bad tourists. And, you know, it's amazing because, you know, we have seen a lot of bad tourism. You go to a country that you're visiting and you don't follow the rules and regulations, and people they feel entitled to that. So I was curious where that inspiration for the book came from.
Thank you. Well, I think the first point of inspiration for me actually came during the pandemic. I started writing this book during the pandemic. And, you know, at that point, like, the journey to write my first book from, like, the first sentence to publication was 15 years. And Neruda on the Park was, like, a long labor of love, right? But during the pandemic, we had finally, my agent and I, gotten to the point where we were going to take the book to market. It was ready. And then the entire publishing enterprise came to a halt. And so during the pandemic, I remember we were waiting, right, to see whether or not the editors were starting to read again and were accepting books. And one of my friends who we love, Angie Cruz, another Dominicana, yay, we love Angie. She was invited to be a guest editor for a literary journal, and she was like, "Oh, do you have a story like 2,000 words?" And I had been thinking about a resort and these employees for a long time. Like those of you who are writers in the audience know that we'll like marinate on an idea for a long, long time. And I just remember in those moments during the pandemic, I mean, I was born in the Dominican Republic, as Lupita read. And when they grounded all flights and all the borders were shut down, I just remember feeling this longing for my country of birth. I kept thinking, like, what if I never go to the Dominican Republic? Like, what if I never get to see the beaches? What if I never get to see these mountains that are so beautiful? And so when I got that invitation, I was like, oh, I'm ready to go. I'm going to write these stories about these employees. And it was just for me, like, it's so crazy thinking back on it now because I have 2 young children. We were homeschooling. It was a disaster. We were working full time. And even though there was a global catastrophe, like our corporate apparatus didn't slow down except for the first few days, right? Then all of a sudden it was like we're expecting to produce at the same exact pace. And so I just remember when I would sit down, first of all, I wanted to escape my life, and I think that's part of the reason why everyone in this book, except one character, is like trying to escape whatever situation they're in. But I just remember feeling that way, like feeling like, oh, there's this longing I have for this beautiful place, so I wanted to capture that beauty of the island. And then I kept thinking about these employees and like how interesting it is to write about a resort, because to me, a resort is like the whole world. It's like you have the hierarchies, you have the class issues, you have the race issues. And so that was really, really the inspiration. I think that's what fueled a lot of the power and that tension in the book.
Well, and I love that you mentioned that during the pandemic, like things kept going, right? Like, and I think about how a central theme in your book and a question is like these characters moving through capitalism and, making choices that because there's life choices, big scary choices because their odds are stacked against them, So I'm really curious about the questions and themes that you feel like you were writing into and exploring through the book.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's kind of hard to talk about these big ideas like capitalism, racism, the one thing that I feel really, really strongly as a writer is that we should write about people and not about ideas, Like I think if there's a big idea, it should come through the characters' lives. And so what I knew about these 2 young women is that they had this like deep love for each other, but that it was very complicated by a lot of the things that they were brought up with. So Laura, who's 27 years old, had to take a mothering role for her sister because they lost their mother when Laura was 14 and Elena was 4. There's a 10-year difference. So she had to take on this role as a mother. And, because their father has a lot of like addiction issues and it's just not a reliable parent. So she had to really be like all in to raise her sister, who's like a daughter. And then the other thing I know was really important for the book is that the resort becomes Laura's lifeline. She didn't go to college. She hasn't been educated in like a formal way. And so when she started working at this resort as a waitress when she was a teenager, she just kept getting promoted and she kept doing really well. And so for her, she believes in the resort. Her sister, because of Laura's sacrifices and working like a mad woman for this hotel, has had this life that's totally different. Like she grew up, there's like a difference between the Pico Diablo, which is the top of the mountain where the local people live, and then the resort that is like 2,500 acres of like waterfront, beachfront property. And so Laura grew up back up there in the mountain where there's like, they don't have running water, the electricity's gone all the time. Meanwhile, her little sister has grown up in a like 5 Diamond resort. She's never had hunger. She's never experienced a blackout. She's just, and even though the staff quarters are very questionable, she spends most of her time babysitting for rich people in the penthouse. And so I thought that it was really important that these 2 sisters have completely different mindsets. And like one of them lives with all the privileges that come from being part of like, even though she works for the resort, she goes to the private school with the wealthiest people. with the wealthiest kind of employees, their children. And so she and her sister have lived very different lives. And so, what I wanted to animate in the book was this idea that you have one sister who really believes in the resort and like the mechanism of upper mobility. And then the other sister wants to burn the whole place down. She's like, this is terrible. They're mistreating the Haitian laborers. We should unionize. I mean, she's 17 years old. She wants to be an activist. But she has no sense of like how to go about actual change in the world, like how you go about. So for me, like it was less about saying like, oh, I'm gonna like tackle capitalism. Like to me, it was more like, let's put these two women in like this combustible setting. Let me give them the same goal. They both want to get off the resort. But the way they want to go about it is so different that that's just going to fuel that tension between the two of them.
Yeah, I mean, you were wondering what I thought and who I think earlier you were like, what character did you gravitate towards? And Laura, who I see as the parentified sibling, the eldest daughter syndrome, the I need to fix everything, I will fix it for you, sister. I identified with her so much. And it reminds me so much of your first book and how you lean into writing this dynamic between, in your first book, you wrote about a mother-daughter dynamic. And in this turn, you wrote about this elder to youngest sibling dynamic. And I'm curious about what it takes to really dig in and just be in those dynamics that are really complicated. It's not one person is good and not one person is bad. Everyone's struggling.
Yeah, I mean, I think people in this book are pretty bad. Let me just say that.
I mean, some people are pretty bad, but I will get there because I have a question about that, but not all of them.
No, I mean, they're complicated people. I mean, it's fiction, so I feel like I really like reading about messy characters.
Yeah.
But what's so crazy is that I am a middle child. And so when I was growing up...
I did not know that. I feel differently now.
Oh. I'll win you over.
But here's the thing. The middle child has that unique perspective to be able to like see and have that insight into what it looks like to like have that dynamic from the other siblings.
I mean, I think it's interesting because I'm very close to my siblings. And so when I was growing up, I remember like wanting to be my older sister for like most of my childhood. Like I just thought she was so cool and pretty and amazing. And then I wanted to be the baby too, because like my younger sister got baby all the time. I shared that middle with my brother. He was the only boy. So when I was growing up, I was really like very upset because I was like, I get to be in the middle. I'm the third girl. I share the middle with a boy. So I just had a lot of middle child issues. Like, there's a meme where it's like the mom is like lifting the baby in the pool and like the older child is like, drowning and the mom is not paying attention. The middle child is like drowned, already a skeleton. So it wasn't quite so bad, but I do think I've been to therapy. Don't worry about me. So, I mean, I just feel like when I was growing up, I just remember thinking that as a writer, I just think that looking at people and the relationships we have with each other is the best source of material. I mean, I'm fascinated by relationships between human beings. I'm fascinated by the way that like our love for each other so often gets in the way of us doing what's right, for each other. And like sometimes we misunderstand because we have this feeling, right, more often than not, that you should be doing what I'm telling you to do better at your life, right? And so that's what's fueling really Laura, because Laura really feels like she's very proud that she has given her younger sister this life, but she's very worried about her sister. Like her sister, she wants to party, she wants to drink, she wants to take ecstasy, and she's like, you are like a Black Latina. Like you can't go around the world acting crazy. Like the world is not as forgiving of us. Like we cannot get away with certain things. And so, at the very beginning of this book, you find out, obviously by like page 7, that, Elena was being neglectful to this little tourist child. The tourist child is injured. And so Laura decides she's gonna teach her sister a lesson. and make her believe that something really bad happened with this child so that she'll grow up. And that's what sets off this fuel, and it's like escalating crisis because they keep doing terrible things, you know? But all along, you know, there's a lot of love between the two sisters. Yeah. And so for me, I did think a lot about these relationships between the two of them. There's actually 2 love stories that are being told. One love story is between the 2 sisters, and then there's 2 other central characters, Pablo and Vida, and that's like a love story between 2 people, a romantic love story, and they're broken up at the beginning of the book. And that's another one that I thought, you know, I really wanted to write about different kinds of love and the way that we fall short of each other, and whether or not love can be a mechanism to fuel us to like eventually arrive at our better self. You know, like I think love can be, you know, a force for power and like really to like make us better people, but it can also make us worse people, you know? And so I was really interested in looking at that and thinking about that through these people.
Well, yeah, like what we do in the name of love is what because I think like I was reading through it and I'm like, oh my God, like withholding of truth. Like this is like a theme or like a question that I felt like was following in the book, like the withholding of truth to preserve an innocence. You know, that was like so powerful to me, like to do that in the name of love because you don't want someone to lose their innocence and their view of the world, but also the ways in which you harm them when you take that from them. You know, so.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're saying that. One of the things I was thinking about was optimism, because Elena, even though she knows that life is unfair, and a lot of what she's doing in the book is actually to try to improve the lives of the other workers, especially like the Haitian laborers in the resort who are just treated horribly. She has this kind of like optimism that everything's gonna work out. And some of the mistakes she makes in the book is because she really does think that someone is gonna show up and fix it. And a lot of that is, you know, because of her sister and the way that she has done it. And Pablo, who is, you know, one of the other central characters, has that same kind of like optimism where like sometimes they see something happening that they should intervene, but they don't because they think somebody else will come. And so part of what I was thinking about when I was writing that storyline from these 2 characters was how like optimism sometimes is a byproduct of invisible labor. Like I thought about my own life, and I thought about, you know, sometimes you meet people and you know that they have like the worst pessimism, and it's because they've gone through certain things in life. And then you meet other people and it makes no sense that they are so optimistic. And you're like, how did you end up being so optimistic? And it's because they have been sheltered. It is because they've had people who have taken care, like, don't look that way, close your eyes when something bad happens. And so in this book, I really was thinking, because the book is about labor. I mean, it is about all these workers. It is centrally concerned with the staff of the resort. It is not concerned with the tourists in the resort. And so, you know, because it is a book about work, I wanted to also explore unpaid labor.
Yeah.
And, you know, and these kind of like mechanisms that can really affect the way your outlook on life and your mindset, how you look at life, whether you're optimistic, whether you expect beautiful things to happen, or whether you think at any turn something terrible is about to happen.
Yeah. Well, and it makes me think a lot about how the sisters are in community with the other workers in the resort and the folks that live in the town, and how some of that love, not love, the turn, you know, it makes me think of your first book too, where you explore what happens to a human when a community that they're part of turns on them. You know, versus what happens when they lean in, and how does that repair happen? And I just felt like that was something in the book that stood out, that is your work, you know, exploring community and like the impact of it on like the human experience, which I feel like is not talked about a lot in general all the time. You know, we talk about community in like a romantic sense, like you have to have community, yay, you know, like, but what it does to you when you're a part of a community that doesn't necessarily like embrace you. Yeah.
Well, I think there's like different layers of that question, so I really appreciate that. Isn't Lupita the best reader? I love listening to you talk about books. So this is a special treat to hear you
I mean, I could talk about your book all night, unfortunately.
I'll listen. Go ahead.
I'm not done. No kidding.
So, I mean, I think, I think a lot about community, and I think what it means to be part of a community. One of the things that happened with my first book is that I was thinking a lot about when I went to college and I came back from college. I felt like this distance between, like, in my family especially, a lot of people didn't go to college. And I remember feeling like people felt a little suspicious of me. Like somehow you've managed to hold this key to know how this place works. And we're proud of you, but we're also suspicious of what you had to give up. Like you're not one of us anymore.
Yeah.
And so it was really painful when I was in my 20s, like feeling, this kind of distance between me and my siblings or me and my primas. It just was very present. And so then I put that into Neruda on the Park because there's like this kind of tension that's happening between Luz, my protagonist, and this broader community, and they're very hostile to her. It's wonderful to be having this conversation with someone who's read both books because this book in this setting, I wanted to explore community almost like Tilted. Because I was thinking about how I wanted the book, and this might be too nerdy. Throw a shoe at me. If I start losing you, somebody has to throw a shoe at me. Because what I wanted to do was really think about the book itself as a structure. And I was like, okay, if I want to really talk about a resort as a microcosm of the whole world or modern society, then I want to think about physically about hierarchies, right? And so, these two girls that grew up without parents and who haven't always felt like their community up in the mountain took care of them. I mean, Laura actually feels that they didn't at key points. They turned their backs on them.
And it's a big part of the book.
It's a big part of the book. I mean, she feels this resentment for these people. And so there's a part of her that's like, I'll show them. So she's like the highest in terms of position in the resort. Everybody else works for her. So they're like under her, right? But what we know about workers at a resort is that the staff is actually at the bottom of the hierarchy of who matters. I mean, every guest you work for, right? You have to cater to their needs and their desires for pleasure. And so I was thinking about how there's this very tense relationship that the community has with Laura. And so, one of the things that I wanted to do was to invite a collective voice. So it only shows up a few times in the book, like this, first person plural. And it is the voice of a broader, swath of the entire community that's looking at these two sisters. And so, very early on, you hear from them, and they're looking, and they know what's happening, even though these two young women are running around thinking they're getting away with stuff, and the community is like, we see you.
Yeah.
We know what you're doing. So I just love this idea of the building itself being a microcosm for society. I thought about the ways that you could tilt it so that if you look at it from this perspective, there's one person that's sitting at the top of the hierarchy, but if you tilt it a different way, that same person is at the very bottom of that same hierarchy when you consider other people being part of it. Yeah. Was that your question? I forgot.
Yeah, no, it was. It was, and I was thinking a lot about how in your book you do mention that you spoke to a lot of, you go to the resorts, and you spoke to a lot of the workers. And I was thinking about how I read this beautiful interview you did with Electric Lit, and you said, there's something that feels subversive about the fact that my immigrant dream enabled me to live a life in the Dominican Republic that probably wouldn't have been available to me. And I think about what it means to go home, for us immigrants here, and to tour, quote unquote, our countries. And I'm curious about the research that you did with the book to kind of explore that and how that felt for you on a personal level.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is so interesting because I was isolated when I was writing a lot of the book. And, I kept writing. I just wanted the book to be sexy and fast-paced, I was like, ooh, if...
It is fast-paced, and there are sexy bits.
But, I was thinking a lot about, the book as a labor book. And I was like, well, what's the job of the reader is to what? Read. Thank you. Thank you. Somebody's awake. No, I know you're all awake. So, one of the things that I was thinking as I was constructing a world full of workers was that if you're a reader, then your job is to read, and I don't want you to ever stop. I was like, I want to make it so that you're doing your job, because a lot of these people never stop working, really hardly ever for the 7 days. And so that to me was really an important thing. And I kept, but this is all abstract for me. Like, it's kind of like an intellectual exercise to put together a book and to animate the desires of these different characters. And what's so interesting to me is that when I eventually traveled back to the Dominican Republic, I just remember looking around and seeing what was happening in my country. I mean, the crisis with the Haitian community was like, birthright citizenship had been stripped years earlier. And the situation was like really escalating a lot in terms of like the just removing a lot of civil rights from those people. And what I thought was so fascinating was that like a lot of people in my own community didn't seem to see it. And I thought a lot about the fact that because I'm a Latina, because the rights of immigrants in this country were at the same time being stripped, I felt a kinship that I don't know that I ever would have felt had I never left the Dominican Republic. So like in a way, I gave that to Elena, that kind of consciousness that I think comes from being removed from like a certain, because we didn't grow up with a lot of money. When I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of money. My grandparents were landowners, so we were in a privileged place, but as a family, we have very little. That's what prompted my mom to immigrate to the United States. But still, like, we weren't Haitian people. So we would always be like a higher class. Like, it was like as a Dominican population, like, you always felt like this sense of superiority, even if you were poor. Does that make sense? Like, you just felt like a certain level. And so, so it was really interesting to me. Like, when I went back and I realized that I wanted to turn this collection of short stories into a novel, at that point, I had sold the book before I wrote it. It wasn't going to be like a 15-year journey, right? Like, I was able to make that happen. And so I went back to the Dominican Republic, and I was like, I have an obligation now to like really understand the nuance of what it means to write from a place that I haven't been since I was 10 years old, consistently. Anytime I do go and stay at really nice places. I'm not mad about that. Like, I worked hard to stay at nice resorts. I like a nice resort. I'm pro-resort, And so there's like something to me about like being kind of pampered. And when you stay at the really nice places, like, you can just go downstairs and get a massage. I mean, that's pretty fly. You're like, oh, my back hurts. Let me go downstairs and get somebody to rub up on me, My husband always, not that you care, but he's also available for like a rub down. So this is being live streamed. He might be watching it. He's going to be like, cringe, stop talking about us. But, I was just thinking a lot about how like my relationship to class is really different from when I grew up there. As an Afro-Latina, I think I have like a sensitivity to like what it means to be a person of color in the world that is very different from like had I grown up in the Dominican Republic. I don't know that I would have a consciousness as a Black person, right? Like, it just doesn't necessarily line up that way in the Dominican Republic. And so like part of what I did was that I started interviewing people, and I interviewed people like of course, Haitians of Dominican descent. I interviewed a lot of people that worked at resorts. And some of the conversations, I was really forthright. Just like, I'm just doing research for a book, and I'm curious about your experience. For people who were tourists, to me, like, that was the part where I didn't have to do much research. Because I think if you show up just being who you are in spaces that are like populated by rich people, and you look like I look, a lot of times you just become invisible. Like, I think a lot of time people just either assume that I work there or, even when I've traveled to like Asia, I think it's kind of crazy. Like, people will be like, can I have a towel? And I'm like, what? I'm not even from here. And I'm still being asked by American people to like get them towels, I'm like, give me the tip. And I'll get it. But it's, it's kind of crazy to me to like think about like what I perceive to be like the access I have had to hear people say like things that are truly out of pocket. Like people really say crazy things. But when I was interviewing like workers, and my husband and I love traveling in the Caribbean, so we've been to pretty much all the islands. And I would just ask people, like I would be like, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you with a tourist? Or like, what's the worst thing that somebody has said? Or what's the funniest thing, And like one of the things that kept repeating as I was talking to like workers in different islands was that like very often, it wasn't like terrible like abuse or like violence. It would be like, oh, like the tourists never looked me in the eye. Wow. And then I became aware of that, and I would pay attention, and I would see how like the older tourists would just be like a rum and coke, and then like the person would go and they would bring the rum and coke, and it was like no sense that it's a body bringing you the rum and coke, and then their children are learning, right? Like, give me a toy or whatever, and not look. And so even something that small, like just an acknowledgement of someone's humanity, for me, like became something that really gave me insight into like how I could make it. Because again, like this book is not meant to be a heavy book, right? Like part of the conceit and part of what was really hard, as someone who was trained to be a literary writer, was to think about how can I make these things important, but not overwhelming to the story. It's like you should feel like, okay, like there's something really messed up about some of these things that are happening, but really that's not the point of this book, right? Like the point of this book is not to be a lesson. It's to be concerned with these people who are really focused on their own survival. And these people certainly do not feel badly about their position in life, right? Like they do not feel sorry for themselves. They know they are humans, right? They know even when there's drama in the community, there is never a moment when they don't treat each other like human beings. And so I think like having those conversations, and it was over many years that I was having those conversations. I think even before the book was an idea, because I've always been really interested in chisme. I'm always like, give me the gossip. Tell me what these terrible people are doing. And so, because I love interacting with people, I feel like it was like an ongoing discussion I've been having that like to me sheds a lot of light on privilege and just like class and like the kind of things, like how do we show up for each other when I think you are subservient to me,
That's really
that
good.
was good. You all were like,
That was good.
All right. I'm feeling good.
So time is running away from us. I do want to leave some time for the audience questions. Do we have anyone with a question? Oh, one right here.
Hi. So you said just now that like you've been doing this research for so many years, before it became an actual book, just because you wanted to. What was, like, did anything change within the people that you interviewed about like what was happening to them at the resorts? Like, were any of the stories alike for so many years, or what had changed in the transcursion of like you asking these questions throughout the years?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing that changed is that, the Haitian community, the government of Haiti was overthrown, and it created an immediate crisis in the island because the mass exodus from Haiti, which was already a contentious relationship for anyone that doesn't know. There's always been like a huge difference between the Dominican Republic as a wealthier developing nation and the Haitian part of the island, which has always struggled. And so when the government was toppled, and the gangs really started taking over both the government and then everyday life. There was just like the influx of Haitians to the Dominican Republic like overwhelmed. Yeah. And so what ended up happening is that there became like a pretty like standard process of deportations, but it became like mass deportations, right? And this is like, maybe 5 years ago. Yeah. Right around the pandemic was happening, they were ramping it up. And so, when I was there, during my last revision of this book, which was last summer, they started positioning like the officers at hospitals. so that if like a Haitian person came to give birth, they had to prove citizenship, or they would be put on a bus to go to Haiti in labor. Like, I'm not kidding you. And so, and I think there was like this sense I had also from observing what was happening there, that, like I have one of my, like a good friend of the family worked in the Capitol, and she was telling me, like, and I said to her, like, I want to know what's happening in the Capitol, and she said, so she started telling me the story because she worked in a store, and she was like, no, when the van comes, we hide them. Like, we tell the Haitians to come in and we hide them in the back, we hide them under the things, and then they leave, and then they can come back out. So it's not like 100% of the people in the Dominican Republic are, don't treat Haitians like they're real people. But there's like this kind of minority that's really driving this cruelty. And so, I just to answer your question, because I could talk about this all day. Like, part of what changed for me is that what started out as like this kind of like, oh, this is gonna be sexy and fun book, and then it's, then all of a sudden I was like, no, my responsibility is to write about the crisis, but to be true to these characters. So, so like Laura, who's the older sister, she doesn't even think it's worth it to try to like address the inequality, because she's like, it's, at one point in the book she says, it's like trying to like, make a difference when a tsunami is heading toward you and you have a bucket. That would be what it's like in this country, to try to like make a difference with racism, right? And Elena, who's 17 and very idealistic, she's reading like Mandela and like, all these like wonderful human beings who have affected change. And she thinks it's possible to make the world a better place. And so, the background of what's happening with the hotel and like these deportations, that I did interview a lot of people that told me about. And some of the things I heard were like absolutely heartbreaking. And so the way that I wanted to put it was to have it through the two sisters. Like, how do they react to it? Like, how do they, yeah. But thank you for that question.
Do you have any other audience? Oh, we have two.
Hi, Clavis.
Hi, Lorena.
So I want to ask you this question again because your answer was so beautiful. I know your front matter is very intentional, and one of your dedications is to your mom. And I know this story is about labor, so can you talk about that connection?
I can't believe you're doing this to me. She interviewed me and she made me cry, which I'm going to cry again.
Don't cry.
If I mess up my makeup, I'm going to be so mad at you. Anyway, my mom is just like a really incredible person. And she did like all the things, she was working. She brought me and my 4 siblings here. And like, she ended up becoming injured because of her work. Like, she broke her back. And for many years, she couldn't even walk. And so I just was thinking a lot about work and thinking about like the things that we just never acknowledge, like the ways that we never kind of thank people for like the incredible things. You were ready? That's a moderator of the year right there, right? But yeah, like I just remember like thinking a lot about, like just the way that my mom taught me about work ethic. And like there were so many times when, to be honest with you, I just felt like I wasn't gonna make it as a writer. Like there were no examples in my community. I didn't know anyone. I kept getting like rejected, and there was no way through. My roommate Angel was there the whole time. I love you. He kept being like, "Sí se puede," but there was like a lot of times when I just didn't believe that it would happen for me, that it would not be in the cards, and so. But there was like a part of me that stayed optimistic, I think, because of my mother's labor. Like, I don't know, like there was a way in which like all that, and even when she like messed up her back and couldn't work anymore, I was an adult already. And I mean, this is gonna be a side thing, but what's crazy, because one of my colleagues from my insurance company was her workers' comp. I didn't work in that side of the company, I worked in a different side, but they kept denying her. Like, it was $300 a week, and they kept like fighting it. And so, I have a very, very complicated relationship to work and to, these kind of like systems. But, I don't know, I feel like my mother really taught me a lot about both like having a strong work ethic, but also the fact that some of us don't get to choose a work ethic. Like some of us have to show up and do the work, even if like your body's destroyed. And so, you know, like when I was writing this book, I dedicated it to my mom because I don't know that, like we talked before about like that kind of my insights because I've escalated in class, right? Like I've ascended and now I understand what it's like to be a wealthy people in the world, you know? But then like there's this part too that it's like I think a deeper message about work that I think I learned because of my mother's heart and like her heart and then her hard work. And you can't come to any more events. Like I've not cried at any other event, so. But I appreciate you asking that. I cannot talk about my mom without crying because I think, just in the context of this book, because I really don't think I would be like, I wouldn't have made it as a writer without like what she has taught me about just you get up and you do it, even if it hurts, even if it's hard, you get up and you do it.
I love your mom. I've met her and she's so sweet. Do we have time for one or two more questions? Yeah, we have one over here.
Can you speak a bit about the theme of escape? You mentioned right at the start that the sisters wanted to escape the resort, which is something that is contradictory because people go to resorts and as guests we want to stay. We wish we could stay there forever. But then when you go, you realize that you're the transient. It's the workers who are there forever, you know? And yet they might want to escape. And escape is kind of like a very Caribbean thing because as an immigrant, a lot of Caribbean people want to escape. They want to leave, whether leave their island or leave where they are, move up from one social space to another. So that theme that you mentioned of escape resonated with me. I don't know if you meant more when you spoke about that in the book.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I mean, I'm a big fan of like just Caribbean literature. And so it was also really important for me to situate myself as like, it's like muscling my way into it because, you know, those of us who are in the diaspora, sometimes it's very hard for us to be part of an ongoing conversation with like our fellow Caribbean writers. And so, yeah, so that was very intentional, even though it did first emerge from me wanting to escape my house in Montclair during the pandemic. I felt the more that I read, you know, contemporary Caribbean books, the more I realized that it's a conversation that we're having among each other. So let me just say this, like part of what I wanted to explore in this book is escape, but through different lenses. So there's like Pablo, who actually doesn't want to leave the island, you know? And like his love interest, Vida, has this connection to the earth. We didn't even get to talk about Vida because it's not all rough. Like there are some beautiful parts of the book that are actually quite moving and touching that are connected to this central idea about like how we are connected to the earth and the ancestors. And so, you know, there are like, you know, a couple of characters in this book that really don't want to go anywhere. And I thought that was important because as a Dominican person, I think there's like this kind of view that we have of each other that everybody wants to get the hell out of the island, and that isn't true. Like there are a lot of people in the Dominican Republic that have great lives, and a lot of that has to do with like opportunities and like the kinds of things. And then for these two sisters, I mean, you know, one of the big questions that I wanted this book to ask is like, who gets to be forgiven? Because for them, escape really does hinge on forgiveness, right? Like there are certain things that happen throughout the book that are going to like either open a door for them or keep it locked. And so, you know, I thought that it was really important to think about like on a bigger scale. You know, a lot of people come to the Caribbean because it's a playground. They can do whatever they want because, you know, it's so easy to like bribe your way out of anything that you do. And we see it, right? It isn't just in the Caribbean, it's in any area that is a tourist attraction. And so that's kind of what I wanted to explore in the book too, is like we as a society have decided that some people get to be forgiven pretty, you know, frequently. People make mistakes and then we look at them and we're like, we should give them a chance. They have a bright future ahead, you know? And then there are other people that like are guilty just by birth, you know? What do you look like? What's your station in life? You make one mistake and it's like game over, right? Like somebody's gonna lock you up and throw away the key. So, you know, so for me, like the theme of escape isn't just like migration or like this idea of, you know, escape as a path to upward mobility, which is what ends up happening for, you know, people of Caribbean descent. But also like this deeper question, you know, about what we do as human beings, how we fail each other. And like when we fail each other, who gets to pay for that? You know, more often than not, the people who make the grossest and most inhumane failures in like our society are the ones who will never face like, you know, any kind of consequence. And so, sorry, I'm bringing you down a little bit. Let's go back to talking about Palomas, the drink of the resort. I appreciate your question, thank you.
I guess we have time for one more question, anyone? If not, oh, yeah. Oh, wait, we got, where? Wait, no, no. Both of you, somebody, go. These are
David is
poets.
like,
These are poets. Both are poets. Yeah, no, somebody.
Oh my God, I'm going to be known as the person who stole Elizabeth Azevedo's question.
Yikes.
This is horrible. I know.
We are going to allow one more.
Okay, perfect. Right, thank you. I'm going to get beat up outside. This is Adrian Garcia. I'm representing with Tintas DC. We're a writers group, Latino
Hey,
writers group here in
Tintas.
DC. A question that I had is like, this is your second book, and I'm just curious to know, like, what did this book teach you, or what did this second time writing this book, this process, what did it teach you about being a storyteller, about being a writer? Because I feel like I've heard stuff that people learn on their first book, but what does it look like for your second book?
Oh, thank you so much for that question. That's such a tender question. Yeah, the first book hurt. I mean, it hurt. It hurt a lot because there were like so much rejection. And even when I thought I had it, you know, even when I thought I was doing something good, I would still get a no. And so it became really disheartening for me. And it's kind of crazy because I just remember there were certain moments when I was writing where I would be like, deep down, I knew I was great. You know what I mean? Like there was a part of me that was like, the world might not ever acknowledge this. And I know I sound like this is what probably delusional people tell themselves. Nobody believes it's true, but I know in my heart there's something special. But you know, it was really difficult to like believe in myself because there was so much rejection. And I don't know, like there was something to me about like the journey to that first book actually was like learning to embrace all parts of me and be like, I don't want to be compartmentalized. Like there's this part of me that is like a strategic thinker and a project manager. And like, why am I keeping that part of myself outside of being an artist? And so like, you know, there had to be like this kind of collapse in my ideas of like what would make me a good writer. And that process was very slow for me, you know? So I just remember, you know, when Neruda on the Park came out, like the next year, my editor was like, I need to buy some fiction. Do you have some? And I was like, as a matter of fact, I have 2 books. Neither one was ready, okay? But I was like, guess who's not missing an opportunity to sell a book, you know? And I remember my agent telling me, like, it's not common to sell a book as an outline. You need to write the whole book. And I was like, let's try, you know? And so I feel like part of what I learned coming into the second book is to be a lot more fierce and to like lean into my own power, because I think a lot of times, you know, and my agent is wonderful. He's really like an incredible partner, but I think it is unusual. But I kept thinking like whatever has happened in my life is impossible. Like the idea that I worked a whole other career for 20 years.
Impossible.
The fact that I worked for 20 years, you know what I mean? And then like somehow I was able to like write this book, and the advance for that first book was so good, you know? It was like people were like, you're gonna be poor. And I'm not poor, okay? Like I came to be, so like there's a part of me that just felt like, oh, the whole world is like held up by these beliefs that we have to be small and we have to shrink ourselves, you know? And I don't think that's true. So like when it came to this book, like I was like, you know what? I only know how to write a book in like 12 years. So the idea of going from like this idea of like short stories, which I had started writing in 2020, and then I sold the book in 2023. And it was like, oh, the deadline is like a year and a half later. So even though I knew this world, it was gonna be different writing a book under pressure. And I was like, you know what? Not only am I gonna do it, but it's gonna be a better book. That's what, and I think I did it, you know? Like
You
I
did
think, Thank you.
Both books are amazing.
Thank
But let me
you.
tell
I
this
mean,
is a
they're
really
very
good book.
different books, you know, but I do feel like with this book, I don't know, like I do feel like I've leaned more. And listen, I did not grow up with like a big head. Like I wasn't someone going around being like, look at me, I'm fabulous. I mean, maybe a little bit, maybe a little bit, maybe a little. But now when it came to my writing, I was very like low self-esteem about my writing. And so I just think that there's something that feels really beautiful about this book. I think like made me come into my power. Like, you know, like I feel like, and that's why a lot of these, Stop it. No, I do feel, and I don't know how many of you are going through tough things. I mean, life is so heavy right now, but I just want to say that, you know, like I think there is something in like leading with the belief that you can, because I think every day someone's trying to tell us you can't, you know, and so I think for me that has been like life-changing, you know, like now I approach a lot of things that I think I might not have been fierce, and I approach them with that sense of like, okay, I'm going to make it.
I think we should end there. That was great. I was going to ask about Spanish and dialogue and the fact that these characters are living in spaces where they're thinking in Spanish and speaking in Spanish, but the majority of your dialogue is written in English. And I was curious about what your brain was doing or what you were thinking about with translation, certain phrases that I'm like, oh, I understand. In Spanish, I get what this is, but it's in English. So it was more of a
I love that
super
question.
nerdy language question of, like,
I love
what
that
you were
question.
attempting
And it's
to
a
do.
great question, so I can plug that there is a Spanish edition
Which was the point
for
of the question.
anyone that
Yeah.
has.
Yeah, I can answer very
Parents.
quickly. I mean, I do think that as someone who like, I grew up, you're all like, we're ready to call. I'm never gonna let you go. I mean, like, more questions. I feel so good here. I just, I left the Dominican Republic when I was 10 and I did not speak English, okay? So then to go from there to like now, I am, English is my dominant language. Like I couldn't have translated this book myself. I don't have that. But I do have a very strong command because I'm fluent in Spanish, like, verbally. And so part of what I wanted to do was to think about the characters thinking in Spanish and then do it. Like in Neruda on the Park, I did something similar where it was like, there's a tension in the neighborhood because it's an immigrant community. So I would like with syntax, I would take out certain words so that it felt like the language was forced a little bit. And that was technically what I was doing with the first book. And with this one, it was more like really think about someone who grew up thinking Spanish and who never lost it. Right? And then like, how would they think about it? And what I found actually, so I'm so grateful you asked this question, Elizabeth, because I felt like there's so much humor in my culture and in the way that we talk and think. And like one of the things that has happened recently is that people will be like, I wasn't expecting the book to be funny, And the book isn't funny like you're gonna like roll over laughing, because it's like fast paced, a lot of suspense is happening. But there's something about the way these characters think and the way that they interact with the world that is like, I wanted to infuse that humor that I think is like very Dominican and very unique. So thank you for that question. I appreciate it.
Well, this was such a pleasure. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you again to DCPL, to the foundation, to Politics and Prose. This has been such a delight. Clavis will be signing books, and Politics and Prose are over there. You can go buy the books, so please.
And thank you to Lupita for being amazing. And thank you again to the library. This was like absolutely a wonderful event.